Thank you, Mark, for the warm welcome. Ladies and gentlemen, excellencies, distinguished guests. It's a pleasure for me to be here again, especially because I know it will be my last chance to be in this building till ICD change the rooms in the middle of August. And next time when you come to a conference to ICD in Germany, you will have a better environment, a much more interesting environment than you already find here. And it's a pleasure for me to stay here as a member of the advisory board because after leaving office, Mark Donfried asked me if I would be able to deliver a speech about sustainability in the development cooperation, and I did in March, and it was my first contact to ICD. And then I noticed who else is all in the advisory board. And in my feeling, there must be 30 or 40 former prime ministers and ministers from all over the world, and this is very important for networking. And you as young students should notice as soon as possible that networking is the half of your life. And for this, I'm very happy to be here again to talk about the culture of cooperation. And this is a very German view, because as a former Minister for Economic Cooperation and Development, I had to explain every time in my own country that I'm a Minister for Economic Cooperation and Development and not a Minister for Development Aid. Because over centuries, no, decades, centuries are Jahrhunderte, over decades, people in Germany talked about development aid. And it's like feeding other people. It's thinking about developing other countries. And we should learn, and we had to learn, that we will not develop one country in the world from abroad. Every country has to do its own work. And that's what I tried to change in the culture of cooperation, to make sure that we don't talk anymore about donors and recipients, that we talk in the future about partnership. We work with sovereign countries and not with pocket money recipients. We work with states where governments are mostly elected, not in every state, but mostly elected, where they have civil society which wants to become stronger, which wants to rule the country its own. And we come out of a history in cooperation, in international cooperation, which was much more like a new kind of colonialism. And to change these minds, it was very important to change the wording. Back from aid up to cooperation. And to change the thinking away from input orientation, spending a lot of money will have wonderful development results, to an output orientation, a results orientation. And in the time where I've been in office, it was a wonderful time because in more and more other countries, the thinking changed also, and we had a wonderful international conference in Busan, South Korea, I think, I'm not quite sure, I think in 2010 or 11, maybe in 2011, it was the first conference where the international community decided that we want to have partnership and cooperation in the future, and output orientation, results orientation in the future, and not only watching who is spending more money. Everybody of you is able to spend a lot of money. Me too, especially my wife. But at least you can't decide before you know the results if you spend it well. And if the international community noticed this, it was the first important step not to spend lower budgets than before, but to look what result will you reach. And this is important especially because we know that a lot of people in international cooperation are living for this cooperation. They feel it from the inside. But we also should know that there's a very big cooperation industry all over the world. Only in Germany, we spent more than 10 billion euro last year over all budgets, official budgets for international cooperation and development cooperation. In the whole world, it's more than $500 billion a year. It's a huge industry. And I will describe it with two short examples. What does it mean? I've been, before I left office in Myanmar, Myanmar was a country which was closed. This was closed for a long time because of the military regime. And I've been in Myanmar twice. First, before the sanctions was lifted, and the second time in December last year for an international European Union conference about donor coordination. Donor coordination is also very important for the culture of cooperation, because if everybody wants to do everything, you won't have good results later on. But what was interesting for me, during the time before the military regime came into office, German international cooperation funded a vocational training center. And we stopped the funding after the military regime came into office. And the regime tried to go on further in this vocational training center. And on my first trip to Myanmar, I decided that we will step in again in vocational training, because good skilled labor, good skilled people are very important for the economic growth, and the economic growth is very important for jobs, and jobs are very important for fighting poverty. And we decided to step in again, and had the opportunity in December on the second trip to go into that vocational training center. And because of this ongoing work from the military regime, the infrastructure was quite okay. But what was very interesting for me is to talk to the director of the center. He showed me what Germany invests in this vocational training center during the 1970s of the last century. And he showed me also how much of this money went into the project, better skilled young people, and how much of the money was used for the external experts. More than 80% has been spent for the external experts. Less than 20% went into the issue of the cooperation project, into vocational training and better skilled people. And this must be changed. It's very important to send experts in the world, but at least it's more important to build experts in the countries where we're cooperating with. And that's the second what I want to say. I met a lot of people. I traveled 125 countries during the 4 years in office, and I met really many people, and in every country where I've been, in every country, up to Somalia. It was my partner of the transitional government before the so-called elections. Everybody said, we don't want aid, we want investment. We don't want your experts. We want you to make our people to experts. We don't want you to develop our country. We want you to help us developing our countries in our way. And that's the conclusion, that we can't fulfill every wish, but we shouldn't do anything what's not wanted. And also this is a part of the culture of cooperation on one level playing field. And I think that international community changed the mind in this kind of cooperation is the most important difference in this century, now it's century, in this century to the century before. Because the thinking changes all over the world, and this is a very good chance to get new partnerships. And partnerships are the basic for cultural diplomacy, because the fundament of it is diversity. And for diversity, you don't need new colonialism, you need new partnerships. And this should be the first part of our meeting now. I was asked, and I'm very happy about it, that I start with a short input and use the time we have to come into the discussion, to give you the chance to answer, to ask what's interesting for me and to answer that.
Hello, my name is Fiona and I'm half British and half German. And my question to you is, what does Germany get out of this? What does it get out of aid or cooperation with worse off countries?
I think we are still in a change. The ministry where I've been in office for 4 years was founded more than 50 years ago. And it was founded as Ministry for Economic Cooperation. Because in that time everybody knew that fighting poverty needs economic growth. Fighting poverty needs jobs. Fighting poverty needs income. And to get a job, to earn an income, you need education. And you must be well-fed, live in a healthy environment. Everybody knew. But during that time, more than 50 years ago, till today, these very huge development industry became bigger and bigger. So my first job was to organize the environment for the public development cooperation. I merged the public organizations for economic and developing cooperation to one new organization. It's called GIZ, German International Cooperation. And it's, I think, the most important and well-organized implementing organization for development cooperation in the world now. But a merger every time also have some losers. People which are interested to organize their own life by organizing the life of others. There are still some development workers which are really interested to help other people. But please, leave them self-important for it. Some of them organize their life to go to a country and organize things normally the government of the country should do. It's in German called Ersatzvornahme. I don't know the English word for it. So somebody does things normally a government should do themselves, so the government don't have to do it, and everything will be okay. Let me give you an example. After more than 20 years in developing the health sector in Rwanda, the Rwandan government asked Germany if we could change now, because health sector is okay. We also had later on evaluation of these 20 years in the health sector, and it's really okay for a Central African country. They said we need more vocational training. We opened up our labor market for the whole East African community to get workers in our country because there's a huge demand in building and in building professions. But we haven't got own workers which are able to do that job. So we need your help in vocational training. And we started also with the private sector to organize our cooperation in the vocational training sector, especially in building professions, but not only. And it was quite interesting to see how many experts in health system became experts in vocational training and building professions, because they organized their own life for staying in a country where they want to work. And if this is the first point you think about in international cooperation, the question if it's aid or cooperation normally is answered. You give aid to be sure that you will have a good life. And this must still change in several points. You're looking as a, what didn't I get?
Why is it profitable for Germany to...
Well, it's not the point of the profitability. I think it's profitable for Germany to cooperate international. But this was what the political partners in the other parties didn't like to hear. I think for a country which is trading all over the world, is profitable when most areas of the world are secure. So we should invest in security. Stability is the first step for security. If you have weak structures in a country, if countries aren't able to make sure that the people and the territorial integrity are secure, normally you can't have trade. For a country like Germany, it's important that people in the world are able to buy our products. For this, they should earn money. For earning money, they should have jobs. For jobs, they should have education. For being able to go to school, you should have something to eat. And a health system which makes sure that teachers aren't ill and go to work. So everything belongs to everything. It's also every time our own interest to cooperate with the people in the world. And what I don't like is that over a long time of years, German development politics tried to make the people think that everything is altruistic. We are doing everything because we want to help you. Yes, of course we want to help the people. It's also a humanitarian question what you have to answer. But nobody will believe it. Every countries have interests. Every countries have interests. So if you say you don't have interests, you only want to make good things, nice to have. But at least this have also to change. Also, this have to change. But of course, humanitarian questions are very important, and you have to notice that they are not the only questions you have to ask. Both belongs together, I guess. And if people understand this, it's a fairer kind of cooperation. It belongs to the culture of cooperation for me to be honest that you also have interests. Your partner will think that you are lying if you don't do it. Better? Okay.
Can I see some hands in the back?
Thank you very much for coming. My name is Juliane. I live here in Berlin, and I'm German. And my question is goes into a bit different direction, and it's about social enterprise, which is currently a quite big topic and got around the world to improve the life of people at the bottom of the pyramid, basically. So rather than looking like what kind of products we can sell them from Germany, it's rather looking into their lives and what kind of products they really need to improve the standards of living, their health and education. And my question is, how does Germany support that? What do you think in general about the concept? And you probably could share some examples around the topic which you probably have seen in your career or experience.
Yeah, I think it's very important, but please understand I can't speak for Germany anymore. Only can speak for me because I'm not in office anymore. But I can explain what Germany does in these issues. Social enterprises are very important partners because they have the social goals that they want to reach, and they have to use economic rules to get these goals. And both together is a very interesting mixture. But firstly, I think we also should think about social insurances. Social insurances, even if they are very small, are a good way to make people believe in their own power. Because when you know if everything is going wrong, there's a rest of security for you. It makes you to be more creative. But both belongs together, and I'm a fan of fair trade systems, but I think it's not so interesting to pay more than normally you should pay for a product. There's a foundation called Aid by Trade. I don't know if you know it. Aid by Trade, or Cotton Made in Africa, is a foundation which invests money in the education of farmers to make sure that they can produce more and better quality of products and can earn more money because of this better quality of the products. And I think this is a better way because it's more sustainable. It's not sustainable to give some more money to the producers. It's nice to have for them, of course. But sustainable is to use more money to invest it in the capacity especially of the people, and secondly of the infrastructure you need. And for this, Cotton Made in Africa and Aid by Trade, for me, is a very good example. There are more examples like this, and Germany is one of the most important funders of microcredits. The KfW investment bank from Germany is funding banks all over the world for microcredits, but not only for microcredits. There are some funds which are filled in the lowest level from KfW with public money, normally out of the budget from my former ministry. Some own money from KfW, which also belongs to the taxpayers in Germany. And the third level is private investors' money, not persons like you and me, but big investors. And they give out loans to new enterprises, bigger sized than microcredits, loans like you also need in Germany if you want to be an entrepreneur. And the interesting is that the biggest risiko is by the official money. The lowest risk is by the private money, and the money which is paid back is going into the fund again like a revolving system to pay new loans for new enterprises. And after the second and the third and the fourth loan, you get better framework, better conditions for your loan, and you can grow with your enterprise. And I think this is sustainable too. So I would mix it. And at least it would be wonderful if the private banking system could organize this, because you also can earn money with it. But they don't have the fun in the risk sometimes, I guess. And it's more easy with public money because a lot of people think it don't cost anything, but at least it costs the taxpayers. Okay?
Enes Bayraklı from Turkey. There are other development agencies, like United States, France, and other countries. Is there a competition between these agencies? And what are the most important regions for Germany for development aid?
So firstly, we are wonderful partners. And secondly, we want to be the best. So of course, there's a competition. But being the best, what does it mean? Finding the most efficient way to have good results, I guess. And in this, there's a wonderful cooperation. Firstly, donor coordination inside European Union. This is very important. And the interests belong sometimes because of traditional lines through the world. France you will find mostly in Western Africa, in the former colonies. Great Britain has more interests in Asia than in some parts of Africa, but also in Africa, especially in the parts where they have been the colonists before. And Germany also, of course, in the former colonies, which have been very few, and we have been thrown out early enough to don't do the mistakes like the other did, mostly, but also in historical cooperation lines. We are very involved in Afghanistan, not only because of the security situation since 2000, but since 1800 whatever, Germans cooperated in Afghanistan, and Afghanistan was much more developed like now in former days, especially in education and scientifics and in agriculture. And now we try to rebuild parts of it with our Afghan friends. We are very involved in Northern Africa, with the whole European Union, and here donor coordination works very well because we have the same interest as European Union in front of our own southern borders to have stable regions. Stable regions are not only security questions. These are also questions of migration and things like this we have to answer. And if people don't have a perspective, wherever they live in the world, every time during the history of humans, they tried to find a situation where they have a better life. That's just normal. We have some other ways of cooperation like others. USAID is a very important partner for us, but they have other rules for their kind of cooperation. Sometimes there are political reasons because of different opinions about issues you have to deal with. Fighting AIDS was during the time of George Bush II, I guess, one of these issues where he thought it's a good idea to build a very new separate organization to make sure that people don't have sexual relations before they are married and things like this. We think it's more interesting to make sure that reproductive medicine will be understood in different areas of the world, and that people which are ill already have a treatment. This is different sometimes, and sometimes it's a competition which don't work really good. Every time, if the competition is not because to want to be better than somebody else, but to make sure that your ideas are the right and the ideas from others are the wrong, it don't work. But normally it's a good cooperation. In my ministry, it was 6.4 billion euro. But it's only the budget from this ministry. There are also Ministry of Environment, Ministry of Justice, of Scientific. So altogether in Germany last year have been more than 10 billion euro. We are the third biggest donor in the world after United States and European Union. And in European Union, 25% is funded by German taxpayers. So we are doing a lot. And we have a competition between France, Great Britain, and Germany, who is number 3 normally.
So let's continue. Additional comments
but
or questions?
It's only an input orientation what you are asking for. In the output orientation, the results orientation, we are the better, of course.
So if we could move the microphone towards the front, I see a few hands over here. Maybe ladies first. Or is he first? Okay, sure. And then we'll come to the front. Okay. And as always, if you could stand and briefly introduce yourself. Yeah. Thanks.
I am Tancred Feuillade from France, and I'm very interested into South-South Cooperation. And my question is the following: what do you think about South-South Development Bank, and especially the last BRICS Bank or BRICS Fund that was created last week? And do you think that the rise of China in the development business, will it change how the West work in this environment?
Yeah. 3 questions. South-South cooperation. I'm a friend of trilateral cooperations, especially of trilateral cooperations because bilateral cooperations are important, but if you have a trilateral cooperation between 2 so-called donor countries and 1 recipient country, or 2 developing countries with different stadiums from development and 1 traditional donor country, you have much better results. And that was the reason why I started several trilateral and 1 quadrilateral cooperation with other countries to make sure that you can learn from each other. And Germany is also in discussion with China. BRICS come later on, with China, because the way of development cooperation from China is very different to the way of the traditional donor countries. The traditional industrialized countries normally try to have especially a developing view on the cooperation. Not only, but normally especially a view what means it for developing a country. The Chinese way is sometimes different because there are some countries where governments are not very development orientated, where you can work in a way like changing railway and raw material against a new president's palace. And that's not our way from development cooperation. But the things China does, especially in financing big infrastructures, in especially African countries, is very important for these countries. We try to organize our projects by qualifying people in a country where we are working to do the job themselves. China's development infrastructure projects normally work in a way like bringing the workers from China to the country, making the world, and sometimes leave the workers in the country afterwards. That's not very development orientated. You have the infrastructure, okay, but you have a very, very big problem in the labor markets normally. For us, it's important to fight poverty by bringing people into work, even if they are not very qualified. In Germany, it was called ABM, Arbeitsbeschaffungsmaßnahme, creating work for low qualified or long-term unemployed persons to come back into the labor market. In many of the developing countries, you have no qualification because you have no education and no vocational training, but you also need work for earning money. And when you bring low qualified workers from abroad in a country to build a road, it's not very development orientated. And this is changing in the moment, and we try to find a trilateral cooperation with China, especially not in the raw material areas in the moment, to build trust, to accept that China went a wonderful developing way itself, and to make sure that the things they learned about developing in their own country can be translated for other countries to make also a good approach in the developing of their own country. And this in combination with the culture of the traditional donor countries could be a way for the future which is interesting for lots of countries, I guess. What you ask about the BRICS Bank, I'm not quite sure, because I think Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa weaken themselves in the international organizations like IMF and World Bank. We changed the World Bank system. I've been the governor for Germany in the World Bank during I'm in office. We changed the World Bank system that the emerging countries become more rights by decisions not only for developing projects in the World Bank, but also for the board and the way to decide who is able to do things. And we strengthened them because they become more important. And if they build their own BRICS Bank and their own IMF, called whatever, I think they weaken themselves in a traditional and more or less well-organized system which is known all over the world. And they want to bring something new what nobody knows. And this can become difficult by financing, at least. They have a lot of financial power, of course. China has more foreign currencies like we have bills in Germany, as far as I know. But I think the cooperation with the traditional industrialized countries would be the better way for them. But it's their decision. They can do whatever they want, but they have to pay it themselves.
Oh, hi. I'm Teresa, and I'm from Sweden. And I'm just wondering, since Swedish, like this kind of aid, has been, it's been very great during a lot of years, but we have been having some troubles with the follow-ups. So I'm wondering how Germany works with follow-ups on this business.
Yeah, I had a very good cooperation with the former Swedish development minister Gunilla Carlsson, and also with her successor. But this cooperation was very close because we both started to build a like-minded group, first in European Union and then later on together with partners from the World Bank scenery, to implement these points, results orientation, involving of civil society, involving of private sectors, important partners for development. And she was a very important partner for this. And she also had not a merger like we had with our implementing organization, but a new organization in the implementing of development projects from Sweden. But her situation was worse than mine because it was more political driven. We had in Germany, we had all over the parties the same wish to make sure that at least the elected government, whichever it is in the driving seat. And the implementing organization should do what the name suggests, implement projects which are decided by others. And in Germany it was vice versa, like in Sweden. And in Sweden there was, as far as I remember, please correct me if I'm wrong, more a dispute between the parties how you shall organize it. I think this was a problem. Even if the people in other parties didn't like me at all, nobody said that the merger was wrong. And we have to follow up it every time because the big GIZ with nearly 17,000 employees in more than 120 countries. Thinks sometimes they decide what's the political will of Germany. And this to change is very important and very difficult because there have been times in countries where the head of GIZ, GTZ, the former big implementing organization, had a better approach to the president of the country than the German ambassador. Because the German ambassador wanted to talk about human rights. And the GTZ brought money. So whom would you like to speak earlier, normally? Even if you are not so development orientated like we would like to have it everywhere in the world. So you have to follow up every time into the organization that they do what the government ordered them to do. And secondly, you have to evaluate the results. And this is just in the beginning. I founded an independent evaluation institute, which is located in Bonn and started to work in 2011 or 12. I'm not quite sure. But I think in 2011 it was founded and in 2012 it started to work. And the first big evaluation was the health system in Rwanda. And this is the only one of the big evaluations in the moment. But they should evaluate as many projects, systems as possible, because till the foundation of this evaluation institute, the implementing organization evaluated the results of their implementing. So if one of our partner countries in the world would do this, we would start a government dialogue about the way of corruption and whatever. Yeah, so you see, we had, when I came into office, we had workers from GTZ in my ministry, which decided what project will be funded. They gave the order to GTZ to implement it, and afterwards the GTZ evaluated how good they worked. And this is over now. But to make sure that it stays also in the future, you every time have to look on their hands what they are doing. And I think this is a little bit more easy if you have a structure like we have in Germany, where the ministry which is in charge for the development cooperation every time has in every partner country at least one person sitting in the embassy is doing nothing else than working with the partner government and watching our implementing organizations. This needs money and personnel. And if you have it, it's okay. If not, it's becoming difficult.
Final question in the front? Yeah, sure.
Thank you, Honorable Mr. Dirk Niebel. My name is Gustavo. I'm a Peruvian undergraduate student from the University of Toronto in Canada. I wanted to ask you, what is the most important lesson you've learned from your efforts to cooperate with other countries in skills development?
In skills development, it's the most important whatever you have to do. I learned wherever I've been, having well-skilled people in a country is the crucial point to make sure that the country can develop itself. Without education, without skills, you have no chance. And to be honest, what was very important and is still important also now and in the future is education. But over a long term, also German Development Cooperation offered education only for the pupils till Form 4, maybe, or 6. But what will you do with the people which are able to read and write, and that's it? You also have to look on skills over the level of the 6th form. You have to look for skills in vocational training, you have to look for skills in science, you have to look for skills in all parts of the society to make sure that at least the people of a country can rule their countries themselves. And for this, we changed our cooperation in education so that we still cooperate by education of the small children, because it's the first step. But we also invest in the education and in the skills of older people, up to high potentials with the Alexander von Humboldt Foundation, where postgraduates are funded to make sure that in a country also scientific has a future. Because without scientific, you don't have innovation. Without innovation, you don't be able to exist on an international market. Obviously, in the most developing countries, first you have to have a local market, then a regional market. But at least in theory, you also should be able to reach an international market. And for this, I'm very impressed about our neighbor continent, Africa. Have I got the few minutes for only a few words for Africa? In Germany, most people think it's a country. Africa, it's our neighbor country. It's a continent with 55 independent countries, sized much bigger than Europe, with a lot of challenges, of course, but with very differentiated developing stadiums between South Africa and Somalia, and with a very young population, which becomes much better and better educated, and which is much better international connected than many people in the same age in Europe. And this is a big chance. And we should use this chance to organize this neighbor continent with this high potential, with this potential as customers, as partners, or as refugees, will be on a good way. And that's so important that we notice that our neighbor continent is much more than people going into boats and shipping over the Mediterranean. It's much more than this. But if we don't cooperate to use these potential, more and more people will go into small boats and ship over the Mediterranean. So once again, to the first question, coming back to you, it's our own interest. At least it's our own interest to make sure that we will have a better world in the future. Wonderful last words.
That's a perfect way to conclude. Now, I'd like to ask everyone to please join me in expressing our sincere gratitude to Mr. Dirk Niebel.